most of us are running on complete autopilot, and that autopilot is driven by the self-talk that is also on autopilot. So it's really like, well, if we can understand where this all, not exactly where, but at least how the self-talk got in there, and understand that for the most part, it's all based on perceptions and meanings that were probably defined by somebody else before you that got in there at a pivotal time in your life, and that you can change these things. So that's really, my work is really about, if you've got some self-talk, which everybody does, some self-talk that is unconsciously having you continue a certain course of action or make a meaning consistently in your life that leads to either inaction or action. If we can identify those, then our brain has the ability to change. We can literally overwrite it, just like in the same way that we learn anything else.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Bob Doyle, and we're going to be talking about how to rewire our brains and neuroplasticity, among other things. But first, I would like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. There you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, little bio on myself, and there's a donate button if you'd like to support the show through Patreon. Thank you very much. There's also a YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. As I said, my guest today is Bob Doyle. Bob is probably best known for being a participant in the movie and book The Secret, and he's taken that work into a more biological and scientific approach to how we can rewire our brains and change the way we think and our programming. Very interesting talk. He has done workshops and he has an online platform that you can work with him if you'd like to. But this information is really fantastic because it's really about how we can change our brains. So if you're interested in changing your brain, this is a great episode to check out. Bob is a font of knowledge, a really interesting guy. So listen in. This is Bob Doyle. Morning, Bob.
Good morning, Bob.
Yeah, two Bobs, and we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff today. I wanted to start with something that we talked about a little bit before, which is self-talk, and I find that to be a really interesting thing when I'm telling myself something about the world or my perceptions and how I'm reacting. It's all going on in my head, and it's what I'm saying to myself. Most of the time, it's not even that accurate. And how that can rule people, and how do we get past that and maybe not be so reactive to our own thoughts?
Well, that is pretty much what my entire career is all about. Like that is the question, because the truth is that most of us are running on complete autopilot, and that autopilot is driven by the self-talk that is also on autopilot. So it's really like, well, if we can understand where this all, not exactly where, but at least how the self-talk got in there, and understand that for the most part, it's all based on perceptions and meanings that were probably defined by somebody else before you that got in there at a pivotal time in your life, and that you can change these things. So that's really, my work is really about, if you've got some self-talk, which everybody does, some self-talk that is unconsciously having you continue a certain course of action or make a meaning consistently in your life that leads to either inaction or action. If we can identify those, then our brain has the ability to change. We can literally overwrite it, just like in the same way that we learn anything else. And that's pretty much what we'll be talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe recognize it intellectually, but then they say, then they go, well, how do I change it? Because I haven't been able to change it so far. What are the tools? Because, let's say I walk in a room, I'm going to pick something that isn't me, just that I walk in a room and I'm terrified because there's so many people and I'm afraid they're not going to like me.
Yes.
Very common.
Yes.
Thing. I don't particularly have that one. So that's why I picked it. I got other ones. How does somebody walk in a room and not feel that way? What happened? What can they do?
Well, first of all, if they truly want to not be that way, the first thing they have to do is to be able to visualize themselves not being that way, because you're not going to change the outside world. That is not what this is about. It's about changing how you respond to the outside world so that then the outside world can respond to you differently than it has. So you get different results in your life.
And how do we, I guess that's the question.
Yes.
What are the tools what are the tools and go ahead. You got very animated there for a second.
Yeah, sorry. I talked about
I loved it.
Yeah. So it's really all we're doing, personal transformation, rewiring yourself. It's no different than any other type of learning, except that we've got a lot of complicated wiring around it. So let's just think about this for a sec. If we want to learn a new language, right, what do? Well, first of all, if we're going to stick through it, we've got a non-negotiable reason why we're going to do it, whether we're in school and we have to, or whether it's become a necessity for our career, whatever. We're going to learn Spanish, right? And with learning Spanish comes all kinds of new information that you're going to have to give yourself repeatedly and repeatedly. You can't just do it every now and then if you want to accelerate the process. You need to do it repeatedly. And the more you do it and the more you practice, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get negative feedback, but you go, yeah, of course, this is a part of learning, right? I make these mistakes and then I make adjustments and so on. You do it enough, and your brain literally grows neural pathways to support this new knowledge and all of this new. Now you are a person who is being a Spanish speaker to some extent, or at least to the extent that you need. So you have changed fundamentally who you are through repetition. That's how we learn everything, walking, talking, everything. Somehow we've got it that if we want to learn to be another way, we need all these processes and techniques and theories and understanding of all this other. No, we're just learning new stuff. We complicate the crap out of personal transformation, which is why I went from 20 years of teaching Law of Attraction and all of its intricacies with the energy and vibration and just so much confusion for people to just, hey, you know what? Your brain can change. Nobody's arguing it. So how do you want it to change? And of course, that's the first step. We have to identify that. So again, to answer your question, we have to have at least some sort of idea of how we'd like to change, because our brain is ready to learn a new way, but we have to change that inner conversation. And when we do that intentionally, instead of on autopilot, we feel it a lot more.
So there is something that I think a lot of people don't realize is that we can change our brain. Because I used to think, well, if I think it, I'm a smart guy, it must be accurate.
Yeah. Right.
I thought stuff through a little bit. And, if I think this, then unfortunately, most of that thinking was on the negative side.
Yeah. So let's just talk real quick, just lay that foundation for everybody, because really the concept here is if you have a human brain, this approach will work. It's just that you have to be as consistent with the approach to changing who you're being as you would learning a new language or any non-negotiable thing. So you've really got to inspire yourself with this new vision. And this is the biggest mistake that people were making when they learned about the law of attraction, is they were focusing on what they wanted out there with no thought of who they had to be to maintain that life once they got it. And so if they never take the action of a person who's going to attract that stuff, guess what? They're not going to attract it. So all of those law of attraction exercises, vision boards, visualizing and all that, they're great, but they have to drive you into action. Otherwise, they're nothing. We have the ability to grow neural pathways in our mind just with our imagination, repeatedly using. We hear about athletes who can practice their shots without shooting. Musicians can do the same thing. We're literally rehearsing. Our brain doesn't know. So we don't have to be out in the world taking all these, chipping away at it in slow motion. We can wake up every day and imagine who we want to be that day. It can be completely different than anyone you've ever been. Your past has nothing to do with it except to the extent that you allow it to be. But when you really, really get that all of it up to this point is just wiring, some of it's working for you, some of it's not. Some of it's great. Some of it makes you miserable. So we identify the wiring that makes you miserable, realize it's just wiring, it's just programming. Most likely you got it. in those 0 to 7 first years of your life when you didn't have the ability to evaluate information. You didn't have the ability to assess and go, is this good for my higher good? None of it. So that's how we got that initial layer, this fabric of what we call our truth. But it's only input. It's data we got from these people around us. Other people have different people, other truths. And so that's why nobody's right. Everybody's making their own meaning out of their universe. So my work is not about you getting everybody to do what you want or having all that stuff out there. It's you being at peace and contentment and joy and passion with the life that you want to live. You get to create it. You absolutely do. And that is not a woo-woo thing. That's biology.
It's also the thing that comes up a lot in my podcast when we talk about people changing. There is a decent amount of responsibility and consistency, and I don't even like the word work, but I think responsibility and consistency would be it. That once you make up your mind that you want something different, then now you've opened this door to having to do certain things, yes, like you were saying, on a regular basis, and being kind to yourself when it doesn't work, to just keep going and not stop.
Yes, understand that it's a journey, and any of those people that you look out in the world that you aspire to be like or who inspire you, they took a journey too. They didn't put up a vision board and then the next day they had it all. Maybe they had a vision board and it moved them through a journey with ups and downs and times when you wanted to give up and were sure that the universe was against you, but it never is. That's just nonsense. You get to decide, but that journey, that's why it's got to be non-negotiable, man. It can't be like, well, it'd be nice because if that happens, as soon as you reach that, and everybody has theirs, the limits of your wiring, I don't care how intelligent, how enlightened, how spiritual, your brain is what it is based on the information and experience you have had and all the meaning you've made of it. But that's once you reach the end of that and you want to grow higher, bigger than that, you're going to feel it big time. And when it gets really uncomfortable, if you don't have support from the outside, if you don't have somebody to give you 12 million other ways to look at something that you're looking at as the truth, then through no fault of your own, your wiring will convince you with 100% certainty, with all the evidence you need, that you do not need to and should not move forward. But it's not true.
I just had this discussion with someone this morning. We're really good at building a case for our beliefs.
Yes.
I mean, we're all lawyers in that respect. I mean, we built an amazing case, foolproof for us.
Oh, it's totally. Here's the problem, of course, as you know, is it's 100% limiting. If you adhere to those stories, they will always be true for you. That's the hardest part for people, is to give up the freaking stories that have justified why they are where they are. Because once they get rid of those stories, oops, it's their responsibility now. Right. And that's a big one. And if they don't have a solid vision that is inspiring, if they don't know what stories they're going to replace this with, they're not going to give them up because it's their freaking identity. If they don't replace it with something that's even more important, why would they jump into that abyss with no inspiration, no guidance whatsoever? But they have to understand the damage of those stories. When anybody comes to me, and they always do with their stories, because they want to tell me, why am I even talking to you, Bob? I go, great, thanks for that. Now never tell that story again. Because every time you do, all it does is it reactivates the chemistry, it solidifies those neural pathways and solidifies that story as your truth. And you can try to mentally override it, with willpower or whatever. But if you keep telling the story, and a lot of people, they get really into the emotion of their story when they're justifying why they don't have, well, this guy and blah, blah, blah. And that's right. Can you believe it? That's so self-damaging. It's so damaging. And you're convincing yourself of something that just absolutely isn't true. That is that you can't change. Well, that's saying that you don't have a human brain. So what kind do you have?
Busy.
And where did you get it?
Well, this is something I was thinking about this morning again, that if somebody has events that happen to them very young.
Yes.
I'm talking about even, in utero and pre-verbal abandonment. Let's pick that.
Sure.
They come into a family that doesn't make them feel safe or loved. They feel abandoned. It's reinforced year after year, and they reach a certain age, and it is so hardwired into them. It seems like that stuff is really hard to change, because it's almost like they didn't get a certain amount of core contentment or love from which to operate to do these things you're talking about.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm not saying that it's a breeze. That's the thing. The personal development industry has damaged this whole transformation process by promising 30, 60, 90. We don't know how long it's going to take for a person to rewire. You can get a temporary hit of good feelings and some action from just about any program. But if it's going to be lasting and really be your reality, the brain has to change, which means way more consistency than most people put into any kind of a program. And they do it in the evenings, or they do it in the hour, they do it on the weekends. This is your life all the time. So yeah, it's going to feel difficult. And depending on the leap you want to take, again, you just get ready to take that journey, because, oh my God, how satisfying it's going to be when you get there, and how inspiring you will be to other people who don't think it's true. If it's non-negotiable to you, you take the journey, because what's the alternative? Not following your dream, mediocrity the rest of your life. And what happens when you don't grow, when you start fighting the nature, which is what this is? We're part of an ever expanding universe. If we don't grow, if we don't follow that thing that is trying to grow within us, that's when depression, disease, anger, resentment, because we're just internalizing, we're not expressing the thing, and it's got to go somewhere, and it doesn't feel good, and it just wrecks lives all the time.
Yeah, I had a friend that used to say, if you're not happy before you get the things you want and the things that you think you are going to make you happy, you won't be happy when you get them.
All you'll get a dopamine hit for sure. You'll have maybe a day or two of hooray, look what I did. But again, you're not that's not, you got to be the person to support that. And there's so many things that this is the thing about rewiring. It's complex as all hell, man, because the dots that are connected, colors, smells, music, a look on a face, all of these things can trigger this network of meaning in a person, which has them see the truth is only one way, and this is the only action they could take. They should run, they should do whatever. And all of it's just robotic. It's just, they think they're being conscious. People think they're making conscious decisions all the time, but it's all based on information and ways of thinking that were wired by somebody else. And so how free are they really making that decision until they wake up and evaluate for themselves? Is this decision, is this action taking me closer to something that makes me feel like the person I want to be? Not that I'm meant to be, or that the divine, who do I want to be? Like, we're here to have this experience. We get to choose. This is not about searching for decades to figure out who you're supposed to be. You're born. It's right there. It's that passion. It's that thing you're interested in. Go follow it. Your brain is ready to learn and hold the information to support you being that person. Just don't get too sucked up into the rest of the world's opinions about what's true. But that's what happens.
Yeah, it is an amazingly powerful thing of what other people might think of me.
Yes.
and let's say they did think this thing you're worried about them thinking, then what would happen?
Yes. When I work with people, I give them a test. It's a little quiz. It takes 60 seconds, and I call it the Transformation Personality Type Quiz. And what it identifies is some of this autopilot behavior that stops people. One of those types is the people pleaser, who you just described. And these are the people who, they get inspired. They want to grow. They want to be the next big version of themselves. But as soon as they start doing it, putting forth the action, stating it out in the world, somebody's going to give them a look. Mom's going to say, well, we don't do that in our family, or one of those types of things. It could be a coworker. The people pleaser, that will stop them, because they just want everybody to be comfortable. They don't want to poke people's fears or whatever. So they just say, all right, I'll just sit here then, so everybody's comfortable. But nobody's comfortable. Just because they're not telling you how uncomfortable they are doesn't mean they're not comfortable. If they were comfortable, they wouldn't tell you why you can't live your dream. And of course, you have just sacrificed the whole reason you're here so that these guys won't give you a look. And the thing is that, we get and this is another thing we've learned about the sanctity of relationships. And, we can't, I've known them for 30 years. I can't just move on. Of course you freaking can. If every time you get together, they piss you off and you're just like, why am I doing this? Relationships evolve all the time. The meaning we give that stuff, if it is holding us back from our journey, we got to let that crap go, because it doesn't serve anybody for you to hold yourself back. And when you break free, from the influences that are literally trying to keep you back. And you do it and you play full out. Those relationships evolve however they're going to, out, they put on hold, whatever. Maybe they're inspired and follow you. That'd be awesome. But once you start really owning it, now you're going to, of course, attract a whole new community, a community that you don't have to make excuses for, a community where you don't have to apologize for what your dream is. That's why they are in your life. And you will have, these will be the richest relationships, maybe even more so than your family and longtime friends, because these are the people who in this segment of your life are the important players.
A challenge for a lot of people when they set boundaries of the consequences of the people that don't like the change.
Yes.
And then, they get dismissed by those people or ostracized. And if you're going to let that stop you, that's a rough way to go. Leaving your life to please another person never works. I tell my kids that don't do anything for me. Do it for you.
The fact that we get this human experience is freaking amazing. And most people take it totally for granted because they're living in reaction. They just go, well, this is the hand I was dealt. Let's see how I navigate this, with no idea that they can take control at any time and start re-navigating, that our brain is built to do it. But the longer we wait, and of course, the more we make excuses as to why we can't, of course, the harder it's going to be. It's biology. This is what we have to work with. We have to treat it very nicely, and we have to be very careful about what we put in it and what we justify saying to ourselves. All those old stories, it is. And I just want to underline and underscore and highlight and point at, for people like this is a new concept, or they're just sort of interested in it. It's gonna feel really weird and unnatural, and like you're lying to yourself, and every fiber in your being is saying, what are you doing? This is not going to work. And that's normal. So you welcome it and go, there it is. Okay, thank you. That's the basic limiting belief. I can't be, what you're saying is I'm not a human being. There's no logic. And once you really shine the light on that and realize that the stories you tell yourself have no truth, no basis, no logic, and absolutely don't serve you, the sooner you can get there and start replacing those conversations you're having with yourself with something more positive, that's when you're going to see change that can last.
I was outside one day with my wife, who's a landscaper, a gardener, and just really talented person. And somebody was walking by, and she's always putting new things in and changing things. It's like in the front yard is like a laboratory for her.
Yes,
to experiment and grow and live and, be in it. She's in it.
It's her creativity. Yes.
Yeah. It's an absolute, altered state when she's doing it. So somebody comes by one day and says to her, and I'm standing there, when are you going to be done? I looked at this person and I said, would you ask Jimi Hendrix when he was going to stop playing guitar? And they just got really freaked out. I go, well, it's the same question. It's the exact same thing.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And then they just kind of mumbled and walked away. I felt like a little bit of an asshole for
maybe
being that way, but they needed it.
Hopefully you planted a little seed, because that's some really good perspective. And yes, this is her. And this is what drives the reason I do any of this stuff in the personal development industry, because Bob, my career track was broadcasting and radio and stuff like that. I still play in that world. I do voiceover work. I do a lot of things other than this, but this conversation just keeps coming back to me because I am so passionate about creative self-expression. And whether that's through, things we think about like the art, art, drama, music, theater, whatever, creativity, but your career is creative. Your relationships are creative. Anything you're up to in life is a creation that you are creating. And so that is a beautiful expression. Like, I'm just ongoing. It's never done. What are you talking about? Like, today I like this. Next week I like this. Next week I like this. And I'm wearing these clothes today and these clothes tomorrow. And I buy. Right. It's like, but people don't think like that, as evidenced by that story. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but if you don't have that outlet, if you do not find a way to express yourself creatively, man, oh man, you start to feel it physically and otherwise.
Yeah. It can be anything, like you're saying. It doesn't have to be, necessarily art. It can be absolutely anything.
Yes.
That you feel good when you're doing.
Yes. It could be speaking. It could be gardening. It could be yard work. It could be carpentry. It could be freaking anything, parenting, anything. Just let your creativity be channeled through what you're doing, and don't let anybody tell you this is how it has to be done if you've got an idea of a different way to do things. Like that's where you're going to get the joy, and be willing to do the things and maybe get feedback you don't like and just keep going and tweaking and going and tweaking, because that's how the masters are made. That's how the people that we see on Oprah or whatever, they did all that stuff. They got laughed at. They made all the mistakes. People didn't understand them. And then boom, everybody wants them on their show.
It's exactly how it goes.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and this guy was talking about the influence of blues music for rock and roll and other types of music, and how what's happened in Western music is that it's hitting the note right in the center of the perfect tone, and it's all numerically kind of laid out with scales and notes, and it's all that way. And that when blues kind of came into it, there was note bending and not chord progressions that were easily followed. And he was telling a story about when they took some African music and they tried to write it down, notate it, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, I can't imagine how you do that.
Yeah, and it was just so amazing, because the rules make things staid and uninteresting and inorganic, in my opinion. I find and it's cool to see somebody who's a master of certain things, but at the same time, what is coming out of the person's inner life that's coming out in the music? And that's true of anything, actually.
Yes, any of that stuff. And I'm so guilty because I'm a musician too, but I do have that. I've had a journey there with feeling comfortable with sharing it, and like, well, what is my role? Like I was trying to say, well, I should want to play for people because I like to play. Like I had this whole should, but I never felt like that was the thing. I just like playing, and then just allowing myself to be like, that's how I'm going to do this until I get a pull to do the other. Why do I feel like I have to do it this way just because that's the track that other people? I'm not out to be a professional musician. I got other stuff going on, but I love to play music. But that doesn't mean I have to go out there and show everybody if I don't really want to.
Yeah, and if you're enjoying it, who cares? I mean,
right. I'm moving the energy through me. It is growing me in some way. It is enhancing my experience of life, which is what we are here to have. It's the moments. It's all the moments, not the moments necessarily where we're making money or doing all of that. It's every moment.
One of my favorite things is that morning cup of coffee. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. It's peaceful. And when I go to bed at night, I actually think about how great it's going to be when I wake up.
Bob, maybe it's a Bob thing, but I'm with you. It's
deal.
that the joy of the first cup in the morning is like, it's just this irreplaceable, it's grounding, it's all of those things, so I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now here's something that was very informative to me, and this fits right in with what we're talking about, changing, that human beings don't do anything unless they're getting something out of it. For example, I had somebody in my life who used to say, so-and-so hurt my feelings. You hurt my feelings. And she would say this to me quite often. And I remember hearing this thing. I go, well, you must really like getting your feelings hurt. No, I don't. I go, well, it happens a lot. There's something you're getting out of it. What are you getting out of it? And so we started talking about it. Not that I'm any kind of psychological genius. I just heard it and I was like, oh, what do I get out? For example, I like to feel sorry for myself. What do I get out of that?
Yeah.
Well, I get to feel different. I get to feel special. I get to feel, misunderstood. I have the warm blanket of self-pity that feels, familiar to me. So yes, I do get things out of it, even though I don't like to feel sorry for myself. So I say on the surface.
That's it, Bob. That's exactly why people cling to their stories. They get something out of it. They get a chemical hit. It's an addiction. It's literally an addiction, even though it's crappy. It's this crappy, comfortable unfamiliarity. Yes. And it's like, and they get to be right. Like, man, when you get to say limiting things about yourself, all you have to do to make that true is don't do a damn thing. Right. And then you get to be right. See? And then you get that. So you get that little hit of right, which feels good on this weird level, but it's costing you everything.
Somebody did ask me once, would you rather be right or happy?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, how are those two connected? Well, they kind of are, aren't they?
Yeah. I was until, I don't know, 40 years old, maybe maybe a little sooner than that, but I sure needed to be right. I needed to be heard. It was like, it didn't matter what the fallout was. And man, oh man, I've learned that lesson. It just because, first of all, nobody's right. It's all a meaning. It's all an interpretation. You might get some agreement from a bunch of people, but you got a bunch of other people who don't see through that lens and culturally, whatever. It's a lie to them. It's crazy. It's what's working for you. Are your thoughts empowering you? Are the things that the meaning you're making out of life? Is it moving you towards your goal? If not, okay, it can change, but you just really got to be willing to take the ride.
It really does come down to every person gets to have this opportunity if they want to take it.
Yes.
Now you work with clients on this, correct?
Definitely. Because like I said, I mean, my first part of my career in the law of attraction space, most of my stuff was a digital program, right? So people download it. There's really very little interaction with me. It's up to them to go through it. Mm-hmm. And that's me and every other person who ever does a program, because the completion rate is abysmal because of wiring. It's not the program, it's not the guru, and it's not because you're defective. It's just because your wiring got really uncomfortable and you need somebody right there to say, no, these are here. Let's come up with 20 different ways you could make meaning out of this, as silly as they may seem, because the thing you're making up that seems so serious and true to you, from my point of view, it's completely ridiculous. So trust me. Let's replace it with something else, right? But you got to have that support, and it's got to be daily. It's got to be, if you're, like I said, if you're going to be intentional about this, then the discomfort comes up way quicker and it's way more intense, and you have way more reason to want to run away. But if you've got somebody that just gently remind you that, hey, that's normal, that's good, it's celebration. We got you right there to the growth spot. We didn't have to draw it out over weeks to get there. You're right there. So now what's one behavior that we can replace today? Just one that you see coming up today, that, a situation where you normally go this way, what could we replace it with? And let's visualize the hell out of it for 5-10 minutes. You just kicking that situation's ass. Who do you want to be? Come up with all the different scenarios that you can possibly imagine, the good ones, the crappy ones, and you figure out who you are, who's that stable being in that situation. And how is that different than who you've been? And then when you get into that situation and all the stuff comes up, you get that trigger, the chemistry's trying to take over, you've rehearsed dozens of different ways to be, and you just pick one. And that really brings the rewiring in, because now you've physicalized it and it's out there now. The world has to respond different. So now what are you going to do with what comes back?
I'll tell you one for me that was a really hard one to recognize, and to feel like I could maybe let it go and replace it with something else. And it was sarcasm. I loved being sarcastic. Loved it. It was a high for me. It was a victory. It was being right. But I did notice that people were standoffish, and I wasn't as close to people as I really wanted to be when I was really honest about it. Mm-hmm. And then I used to be a stand-up comedian. So I thought I justified it as, oh, well, it's my income. I need to be a sarcastic guy.
Sure.
To make money. So there was a justification. There was financial belief. But then I started to really look at it. What am I, and then I saw that in Latin, the root of that word means to tear flesh.
Did not know that.
Yeah. Is that really what I want to do? Do I want to tear flesh, or do I want, kindness? People,
Yeah.
And so I decided to keep my mouth shut when I wanted to be sarcastic. That was the first part.
Now, how hard was that for you?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard because the dopamine hit, as you were saying, was fucking
like,
huge.
oh my God, I got a line right now. I got a line right now. I got a line right now. Right.
Yeah, I call it comedy blue balls. I mean, I literally,
That's
literally
great.
Like this would have been so great.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
okay. Yes.
So yes, it was very hard. But then I thought, well, why? What am I getting out of it? And I realized, well, I'm physically a small person, so I can't physically fight. I never was able to do that. So I used words, and it was a way to keep people insecure, off guard. And it was a bullying technique. And it was a way to deflect my parents from me when they were doing things I didn't like. And just everyone. It was a manipulation and bullying. It's really what it came down to. The justification was that it's funny. Well, yes. It is a little funny,
but it's a lot mean.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. The bad energy associated with it kind of outweighs that dopamine hit of cleverness.
And I had that reverse. It's really funny, a little mean. It's a lot mean and a little funny. So I thought, well, what is going to happen if I take it away? Well, then I'm going to be vulnerable. That's terrifying. I don't want to do that because now I don't have my armor. I don't have my weapon. I'm going to be hurt. Well, do it anyway. Don't, be kind, make people feel safe around you, see what happens. The worst thing that'll happen is you'll hate it. You'll be vulnerable, and then you can take it back if you need it. Keep it in your hip pocket. So
sure.
I thought, well, I'll start with that. And what happened was the exact opposite of the thing I was afraid of happened. It made people feel comfortable and like me more. And then I liked them more. And then it was more sincere, more earnest. And I realized this was a survival tool that I no longer needed to embrace.
Yes. And a lot of it is survival. It's crazy how these stories link to survival. Like somehow, if you were to go through somebody and really extrapolate and dig down what they think losing their story would cost them, often it's their life. Somehow they've connected it. So it's like a true, like, no, I have to, because, everything else is unsafe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And with nothing to go for, it's going to feel pretty unsafe for sure. You're going to be all kinds of vulnerable. But if you have a mission, and it doesn't even have to be fully fleshed out, because guess what? No matter how fully fleshed out you think it is, once you get about a quarter of the way there, it's going to evolve, right? Your vision's going to evolve. Something's going to come up because of the action you took, but you use whatever sort of plan you can formulate or however you're being pulled, whatever's there for you to do. You don't get stuck on, I need the long-term plan, because that's not your job anyway, and it's going to change. So what's there for you to do, go do that so that you can get the feedback you need to take the next step that we will give you when it's appropriate. That's all the law of attraction thing you even need to think about. I mean, people got so stuck on figuring out the law of attraction, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. But the law of attraction just does its thing. We complicate the crap out of our manifestation process by getting in the way, throwing in all of these, accessing all these negative beliefs and second guessing everything. It's like, what are you thinking about right now? You're thinking about the law of attraction, aren't you? You're supposed to be thinking about you. Right.
You give me any kind of example of one of a big breakthrough for a client maybe that you worked with. I love to hear any sort of experiential.
It's evidence. All sure. And most of it is like, there's all kinds of things, like some of them. And again, we also always, we look at what is important to the client. It's like, what is the life change for them? Because again, I'm really about the people who I work with. I just want them to love their life. Whatever it looks like from the outside, whatever anybody else would think of it, it doesn't make any difference. It's about what's important to you. So what I love is really it's a journey in confidence building. When it comes right down to it, it's that belief that you can do it, that you can. It comes down to the confidence that, and really, if you're a human in your brain, you have a brain and it can change. That's all the confidence you should need. But, it's a journey to get through that confidence to try on these other things. So people who have got like sitting on like business gold mines. Okay. This is like they're sitting on a gold mine and yet their behavior is holding them back. Some beliefs about, well, I don't know if I can, that kind of stuff. All we got to do is tweak that. And now they got these advertised. Anyway, it's building that kind of thing. Health related issues. I got people spontaneously quitting drinking. That's not even why they came. See, that's the whole thing. It's like they realize, wait, the person I want to be doesn't drink. It doesn't jive with who this future. I can't have that. That's how I quit drinking in 2016 overnight after decades, right? Of like, I'm never going to quit drinking. I got this, to overnight, because I realized, wait a minute, the vision I have for myself, the drinking doesn't factor into it, because this is what happens when I drink, and that will all prevent this, right? So it's like non-negotiable. Okay, I got to give that up. It's not that easy for everybody, but it can be. And like I said, these people didn't come in to quit drinking. They came in to be happy. They came into what's next for me. And that is a byproduct. Quit smoking, quit drinking, all of that stuff has happened. Losing weight, just like, oh, okay, the new me can't be this.
Well, I think those are all really big things for people. They're real anchors.
They're life-changing. Yes, they're life-changing. They go from, I'm feeling really stuck, like this may be all there is, and maybe I'm on the decline, to, wait a minute, no, I've got all kinds of freaking possibility. And these are all age ranges.
What's the youngest you've ever had somebody?
Some gal in her 20s who...
That's pretty young.
And she went on to she's this power coach out there. She does stuff for women that is like, I look at it and just, well, okay, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, because I think The Secret, one of the things that The Secret did, because it came out 15 years ago, and a lot of parents showed it to their kids, and those kids are growing up, and they're out there, and they have a different mindset than the generation before that, who didn't think about how they might be able to create their reality and how they should follow their passions and have dreams and hold a vision. Like that just wasn't part of my upbringing. But there's a whole generation of people who have. And now I'm getting interviewed by these people on podcasts, these kids who say, I saw that when I was 9. I'm like, thanks for the age check. Yeah. But, but still, it's really cool that I watch that, because back then it was like, how do we teach our kids this? What do we do? And what's possible? Well, now we're seeing it. A lot of really conscious young people.
Yeah. That was a powerful movie. I mean, I watched it more than once.
Me too.
Yeah.
But not as many as you'd think. I've probably seen it like 5-6 times or something like that in all of these years, because it's like, okay, I know. But every time I watch it, it's usually years between. I'm like, I forgot they were in that. So
yeah, and it's a nice range of people from way out there in just the sort of super spiritual manifestation to practical things that are
certainly, I'm sure, by design. I mean, you've got the ultra spiritual people, and I hadn't even been in the industry for 3 years. I mean, I had no track record in the personal development industry, except that I had been selling this Wealth Beyond Reason Law of Attraction program online for 3 years, but not that many people knew me, but it was a huge program. And so, I think here's just this guy who got this stuff figured out was an important voice that they wanted in that thing.
So if somebody wants to begin this change in their life, what would you suggest? Let's say they go, well, I don't have the money to go pay somebody to help me. They're telling themselves all the things to stop them. What can they do to start themselves other than just say, you know what, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to do some of these things, or I'm going to make a commitment today to exercise every day?
Okay. Well, there's a lot actually in that little hypothetical scenario there. If a person was to tell me I don't have the money, it's not about extracting money from them at that moment. That's not it, because there's plenty of stuff I can give them to do. But we got to get that conversation changed, not just for me, but for them, for the rest of their life. Right? Because if they keep telling themselves that, their actions are going to sustain that as a reality. They'll feel like they're working really hard, but if that's their belief, they'll only do what supports that belief. So that's the first thing I would give them, a free coaching in that moment. But again, the first thing you got to do is to identify where you're in autopilot. You may know in some areas, and other areas you may not, but that's why we have the quiz. So if someone was asking me personally, what do? I say, go take the quiz. It's free. Then we've got some information, some specific information, behaviors that we can look at to try to replace based on what you really want in your life, right? So it's an inquisition. A person just by themselves, again, they're by default, by definition, their thinking is going to be limited. It's limited to what their experience is with all of its biases and meanings and what's possible for them. You almost have to get some help from the outside, somebody who knows how to do this, someone who can see the stories being told and be a stand. Because I'm telling you, no matter how committed you are, and I know this from personal experience, and I know this from working with a gazillion people, when you reach the limit, that's it. If you don't tap into other resources, you're most likely going to stop yourself and justify it forever. And now you got a whole new story about, I really committed. I worked on this rewiring thing, but I stopped. But if you stop, then you didn't. It just shows that you never really believed you were a human being with a brain in the first place. Because if you know it's going to be a journey, it takes as long as it takes. And I'll say this. I know I'm saying very long sentences, but this whole thing, it's not about the destination, which sounds so cliche. But the destination, that goal, that vision, that's what pulls you through the experience of life. And that's where all the juice happens. The ups and the downs and the wins and the losses and the relationships, and all of it is during the journey. It's not when you arrive. And like I said, the arrival point is probably going to evolve, and most likely should, as you get closer to it. So it's about being present and enjoying the journey and getting what you can out of the experience of every moment.
Yeah, I like that idea of, well, the two things you said, that there's no arriving because the arrival point's going to change. And the idea of being involved with other people to check what your mind is telling you. I don't think I could do anything by myself these days without having people to bounce stuff off of. It's really helpful, even if I'm the one that comes up with the answer by talking to them, which is ultimately what you do.
True.
That has been super valuable to me, to run it by somebody.
But if you're a person who's a lot like me, who thinks they're so freaking smart, right? Not like know everything in the world, but like I know how this stuff works, right?
Sure.
I got this, and they logic and intellect and all that stuff. I don't need anybody. I know they'll probably say this and this.
Yeah.
You don't know jack, right? But boy, oh boy, you think you do. And that's that little sweet little juice you get. Like, I'm right about this, but boy, I really am stuck.
I was interviewing someone else on this podcast who.
What? You've spoken to others?
Well, yeah, when they're not as good as you.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for the validation. And
the thing he starts with when he talks to people is he asks this question: what is it that you want that you don't already have?
Well, that's good.
And it's a great first question. And it could be something, I want to get rid of something, or I want something that I don't have. And then it's a very sort of methodical kind of questioning to see what are the stumbling blocks, the belief systems that are stopping it.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting exercise, which I was given a long time ago, to write down the things that I believe in about every single category in my life. What do I believe about relationships? What do I believe about money? What do I believe about people who are successful? What do I believe about the way I look? All kinds of stuff that you can write it down. And I was very surprised at some of the things that I was embarrassed actually about.
That's a really good exercise because the more that's the gift, is exposing all of that stuff. Like when I work with folks journaling is a part of it, because it's just crucial that you play with some of these ideas out of your head and see them. It can be just the right amount of confronting. But like in the case of where I quit drinking, it was because I saw the reasons I held on to it on paper and how goofy they were and how ego driven. There was no logic. It had nothing to do with anything. That helped me to go, okay, I got to get rid of this. But in your head, it's all just the logic and the meaning, and it all just sort of makes sense. But when you just see it isolated like that, you go, oh my God, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Where can people take this quiz?
So they can get directly there by going to tptquiz.com for transformation personality type quiz.com. And you can also access it at my main site, which is meetbobdoyle.com.
Yeah. You did that with your good radio. Was Bob Doyle.
Meetbobdoyle.com for all your Bob Doyle needs.
I have no more Bob Doyle needs because you've met them all.
Awesome. Well,
maybe I do. I don't know. Maybe I actually want to go take the quiz. I want to see what it
quiz.
Is.
That's right.
Take that quiz, and if I score high enough, do I win something?
It's not high and low. You just learn a type. It's a little light that gets shined. And then I tell you some things that you can do with that type. It's not that the types are bad. It's just like, given that this is a behavior that is related to this type, here's something you might try, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Anything else you would like to add to the conversation or promote even? Because people need to promote wonderful things that they're doing.
Well, once they take the quiz, then they'll learn about our Evolve Your Excellence program. And that is where I do my work with people. That's the community. That's the coaching. That's the content, all the exercises, the tools. That's where I work with people on rewiring when they decide that they could use some assistance. So
yes,
that's about all I'll promote. The quiz is really the thing, because that usually gets the lights on for people, and then they go, okay, well, what can I do?
So go to meet Bob Doyle and turn the lights on. That's what we're going to advocate for today's podcast. Thanks so much for talking to me, Bob. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks. It was my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to The Exploding Human. Please check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com. the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and the Exploding Human Facebook page. Big thanks again to Bob Doyle for being on the show. Check him out at meetbobdoyle.com, and you can find out more about his work and how to retrain your brain. Have a fantastic day. Bye.